I just read a card that said they couldn't have made it on their own. And so many of you people have told me that very same thing. If I hadn't have felt the prayers of God's people, I don't know what I would have ever done. That's the way it ought to be. That's what it's all about. Now, in the church where no membership is required, and by the way, there are many churches out there today, there is no formal membership required. You can vote, you can take part, you can do whatever you want. There's no formal membership procedure required. We have one here. We have it for my protection, for your protection. We have it because it shows a real sign of commitment. It's just not something you have to adhere to certain procedures. But many churches out there don't have that. And in the church where no membership is required, there may be a willingness to confront sin in the biblical manner, but there is no authority to take that Christian and the accountability to its final degree when necessary. That is, if a person is not a formal member, you cannot take that person, biblically speaking, to a place of church discipline. You have no right, you have no authority. And you can never excommunicate. So not only does church membership provide personal safety, it also provides a forum in which to be obedient. There's safety in numbers. I know if I do something, if I transgress, I know I'm going to be told by one of you. I know that. I went in the liquor store to buy booze. That's what you do in a liquor store, right? Why would I go to a liquor store unless I was going to buy something? Well, this time I wasn't buying anything. I was getting boxes to pack up books out of my library to take downtown. And I was approached at church one day and said, didn't you used to have a drinking problem? And I thought, where is this going? I'm trying to think in my mind, what have I done? What have I done? Where did this come from? And I said, why? Well, I saw you go to the liquor store, and I just wondered if something's happened. Well, you can't do anything. But next time I go to the liquor store and actually buy something, I can just say, is there a box? So see, it works both ways real fine. But there is an accountability, and this person was, and you know who you are, but to me you seem so embarrassed that I was just getting boxes. Like you were hoping you had something. Not because you wanted to malmeet me, you really wanted to help me. I really believe that. And I'm sorry I disappointed you that time, but I am so pleased that you took me to account. What was I doing in the liquor store? I would expect that of you. I wouldn't expect anything less. If you see me leave here without my seatbelt on, I expect you to approach me. How come you didn't have your seatbelt on? Those sort of things. Yeah, I don't mind that. I do not mind accountability. And that's what it's about. Also, to carry out simple obedience. In Matthew 18, we have a step-by-step plan for dealing with a believer who has fallen into sin. And time doesn't allow us to go through all these scriptures, but you want to write them down. Matthew 18, 15 to 17. And the way the procedure is given, if somebody's overtaken a sin, you approach them. If they don't listen to you, then you take 2 witnesses. If they don't listen to the 3 of you, then you take them before the church. The church. Now the question that comes to mind, we must know who is part of the church and who is not part of that local church. And if you don't have membership, how would you know? How would you know? And we have no authority over them outside the church. Now I would like you to look up 1 Corinthians chapter 5 with me. 1 Corinthians chapter 5. And if you look down at 1 Corinthians chapter 5, it's talking about a young man in the church who was overtaken in a sin. And that sin was having an intimate relationship with his stepmom. And Paul writes to the church and he says, why haven't you dealt with this? I'm not even there, but you haven't dealt with it. Why haven't you dealt with it? And he goes on to give an explanation. Then in verse 12 of 1 Corinthians chapter 5, he makes a statement. For what have I to do to judge them also that are without? Do not you judge them that are within? And if you read it, I'll just take that one verse, I know that, but if you read it in its context, he's talking about the church. We have no right to judge them outside the church, but we have every right to pass judgment upon those inside the church in regard to sin. Amen. Because they're family. It's like you being a part of your family. If your son or your daughter is caught in an act that you don't appreciate, you're going to confront them. You're going to deal with it. Why should it be any different in this family? Now go over to Hebrews 13 and 17. Hebrews chapter 13 and verse 17. In Paul writing to the Hebrew Christians who were being severely persecuted, when he comes to the 13th chapter, he encourages them to continue in love one with another. Then he talks about strangers, then he talks about marriage, and then he talks about God never leaving us. And he goes on talking about the altar, talking about the upcoming heavenly body, talking about sacrifice. And he comes down to verse 17, and he says, obey them that have the rule over you, and submit yourselves, for they they watch for your souls, as they that must give an account, that they may do it with joy and not with grief, for that is unprofitable for you. Now, what Paul's saying here is that you are to obey me. That's really what he's saying. When it comes to the spiritual truth of Scripture, you are to obey me. You're to check it out, yes, just because I say it doesn't make it so. But if I can support it by Scripture, you are to obey. Because if I'm the mouthpiece of God, then literally you're obeying Him. You're obeying Him. Now the question is, how would you know whom to obey if you didn't commit yourself to a particular person? Or a particular group of people? Whether it be pastor or elder or such. How could you do that? And how could a pastor know who he was to shepherd, as commanded in Acts 20:28, if there was not some system of membership? You see where I'm going? There has to be some kind of a procedure to follow. And how could an elder know the people for whom he will be held accountable, as we just read in Hebrews 13 and 17, if there's no formal dividing line? It would seem that to obey the commands of the Bible in regard to fellow believers, one must be a part of a local assembly. That is, if you're going to be obedient to the Scriptures, in the truest sense of the word, then you have to be a part of that family to institute those obedience steps, those commands that are given in Scripture. A third reason to join the local church is to fulfill your Christian purpose. Look at Philippians 2:12. This is one verse that has been maligned terribly. Philippians 2 and 12. And Paul says to the church of Philippi, wherefore, my beloved, as ye have always obeyed, not as in my presence only, but now much more in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. And you can just appreciate how that verse has been so maligned down through the years. Work out your own salvation. The words work out in the original language mean in the most simple terms to fulfill your purpose. That's what it means. You cannot work out your own salvation. You have nothing to do with your own salvation other than obedience to that salvation. God worked out the salvation. God took care of that. But work out means to fulfill your purpose, to accomplish that which you were meant to accomplish. God created you and saved you for a purpose. You must discover that purpose. And the local church provides the context for believers to discover and fulfill the purpose.